What is up, fam? So today we're going to be talking about Andrew Yang, who is running as a Democrat in 2020 for president, and he is the cool new voice among dissident people on the right and the left, frankly. So this is because Trump has proved to be mostly impotent. Now, I could sit here and explain to you his platform, but I think we'd be best served by jumping straight into the memes. So if you go search on Twitter, #YangGang, WikiLeaks recently tweeted out, Trump losing the meme war to 2020 upstart already. Internet memers flock to Andrew Yang's campaign centered around AI-driven mass job loss and universal basic income, UBI. Here's one of Homer wearing a Trump hat, moves into the bushes, moves out. He's wearing a Yang 2020 Yang Gang hat. So there's some pretty funny memes out there. You got the Pepe wearing, he's switched allegiances now, wearing Yang Gang merch. And this is supposed to be Donald Trump now in 2019. You might have seen this one. The Virgin President versus the Chad Yang 2020. So we got Donald Trump no wall in 2019, 36% approval rating. Israel first. Went to CPAC, unironically. Small hands. Globo homo, etc., etc. And here we see the Chad Yang with $1,000 everywhere for everyone. Flip over here to some account calling himself the Gowned Crusader. Maybe that's, I think it's supposed to be a Millennial Woes parody account. Not sure. Millennial Woes was banned, so it couldn't be him. Can anyone red pill me on this Yang thing? And you got some more memes here. America going to shit with a guy standing with Donald Trump. Girl walks by with the face of Andrew Yang. America going to shit plus $1,000. Here's another meme. So Donald Trump showering some rabbi with money. Andrew Yang showering some guy with a Yang Gang hat on with money. Here's another one. You got a road sign: unrelenting immigration, degeneracy, feminism, gay pride, and civilizational decline. Exit: same, but $1,000 a month. Alt-right. It's pretty funny. So we will talk about universal basic income on this little episode here. But I wanted to mention the positive things, and the positive things with Andrew Yang. Why is this happening that so many people who formerly supported Trump in 2016 and so on are now supporting this guy running as a Democrat and giving away money? You know, it seems bizarre. Well, yes, you have the coming job loss, Armageddon caused by artificial intelligence that we'll get into. But you also have some very interesting comments that Yang has said before. And he's actually shown some sympathy for the white working class. Now, mainly his shtick is talking about truck drivers, because they are, there's something like 3 or 5 million of them throughout the United States, and it's a huge industry, and within maybe 5 or 10 years, these jobs will be going away. So the question is, what are we going to do with these truck drivers? That's actually where the learn to code meme sort of originated, is the mainstream media heartlessly was just saying, well, these guys are going to have to learn to code. We're going to have to retrain them and so on. And Andrew Yang is here saying, he went on the Joe Rogan podcast. He's been on other podcasts and so on. And he's out there saying, we're not very good at retraining people, so we have to find some other solution. His solution is a universal basic income of $1,000 a month. But he has shown some sympathies for the white working class, and I just wanted to play some of those clips here.
Hey, Joe, and this is like something that I've picked up from...
Hold on a second. For some reason it's being robot-y.
Dennis in part. So I'm with this trucker in Iowa. And he says to me, like, I don't think that Democrats care about people like me. And he says that to me while I'm in his truck. And I'm just like, I can understand why he feels that way, but that's incredibly destructive because there's a point at which Democratic Party used to be very, very heavily aligned with working class Americans. Yeah. And there's now some kind of pathology that if the person who's suffering is a white man of a certain background, then the suffering somehow diminished. Like it doesn't count as much if they're a trucker. And that's something that I find really destructive. It's like we have to start acknowledging the source of the problems. One thing I'm saying to people is like, look, it's not.
Right. So there he is. He's actually acknowledging that there's a problem that is facing white people in this country. And I think that is a large part of where this Yang Gang thing and this enthusiasm for Andrew Yang is coming from. At least among the alt-right, among the dissident right, and so on. That's frankly why a lot of people have decided to support him, even if they don't agree with his policies, because this is incredible that any politician could get away with saying, oh, there are problems facing white Americans. You know, Trump has used the word white only once, and it was in referring to whites in South Africa. But beyond that, he speaks in euphemisms. He says things like the forgotten men and women of America, right? We all know who he's talking about, but he won't actually go so far as to say white people. Because, oh, well, that's getting into identity politics. And more people are realizing identity politics, it just means anti-whiteness. So, you know, even though this guy's running as a Democrat, the fact that he names white people in a sympathetic way already wins over a lot of people. Can you imagine if a Republican did this and stood his ground on it? I mean, look what they did to Steve King. But yeah, this is economic populism. If a white guy running as Republican was talking about the things that Andrew Yang is talking about and named white people in a sympathetic manner, I guarantee you the mainstream media would be calling him the next Hitler. There is another clip here that I wanted to play.
Normal job.
So if you make $1 million a year, you still get $1,000 a month.
Yes, you do. I mean, it's opt-in, so you could opt in and take it, which most Americans would, because it's still $1,000 a month.
Yeah, people get greedy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, $1,000 to get my nails done. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or give it away if they felt like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so those are the things that are at like all-time highs. Is like all these negative social indicators. Mm-hmm. Here are things that are at all-time lows. Getting married, starting a business, having a kid, moving for a new job. All of those things are at historic lows in the United States of America.
Having children, really?
Yeah, we're at record low birth rates right now. And it's largely because people feel too strapped to have kids. I mean, that's literally where we are.
When you say record low, by like what percentage?
You can look up right now. Jamie, I don't know if you want to look this up, but stories have come out over this last year saying that Americans are now at the lowest rate of childbirth that has been the case in decades or ever.
It's true. It's true. And it's happening in America. It's happening in Europe. Basically, every white country is experiencing this. And why is this happening? People, I would say, are losing faith in the system. They're seeing the economy crumble. They're seeing this degeneracy creep into their society ever so slowly. But now suddenly it's accelerating. So people don't have the optimism that they used to have. And we got a little bit of a bump, I think, after Trump was elected because there was optimism among white folks. I was optimistic for sure. And so I think we did see a little bit of a bump. But now things seem to be going back to the way they were before. Nothing is changing in regards to immigration. In fact, Trump has said, well, maybe we need to be bringing in, because the economy is doing so well, maybe we need to be bringing in even more legal immigrants. And that is so unsympathetic to the working class because these are people who are going to get pushed out. Andrew Yang disputes this. Granted, he will say that, it's not immigrants that are taking your jobs. It's just the technology that's taking your jobs. Well, I disagree with that because supply and demand is a thing, okay? I'm sorry, I know you've run a business and everything, but in terms of economics, you are insufficient. So if you bring in more workers into the country from shithole countries who will do cheap labor stuff, that's going to drive down the price of wages for everyone. And so the big businesses love this because they get cheap labor. But of course, the coming AI apocalypse is going to change all that. And then what? We're going to be left with not only white truck drivers, we're going to be left with all these immigrants who are unskilled laborers as well. So what are we going to do that? He doesn't address that question. In fact, he's been supportive of, Andrew Yang has come out and basically supported amnesty. He's like, we need to find a pathway to citizenship, which granted, the rest of the Democrats say that. Maybe he feels he has to say that. But that's terrifying. There's somewhere between, depending on who you believe, there's somewhere between 11 million and 30 million undocumented, basically illegal people here who don't belong here. Well, there's a lot more people who don't belong here, but who came here illegally. And that could be just crossing the border. That could be overstayed visas, etc. But to just say this mass of people, we're just going to, give them a pathway to citizenship, that is suicide. And so, of course, Andrew Yang is an accelerationist. And for a lot of people, that's appealing. But I don't subscribe to that. I mean, I'm sorry. I think that we have to try as best as we can to turn this thing around because, acceleration, you don't know how fast it's going to come. You don't know how slow it's going to come. But anyway, he at least is sympathetic towards the white working class, and that is a lot of the voting base. How did Trump win the election? He didn't, not the popular vote. He won by winning the Electoral College, winning all of these countries. All of these red states in the heartland of America, which are still, to this day, mostly white areas. Okay, so let's talk about the universal basic income. Now, Hotep Jesus, a black nationalist, is quoted as saying, "Socialism is something you practice with your family, or maybe even community. It doesn't work with large populations, especially when they are not homogeneous in race or ideology." So, very, very true. Very true. So the problem that I see with Yang's calculations here, and I think you have to have a certain degree of intelligence to understand this. The problem, is that the problem with economics in general that people usually fall into, the pitfall, is that when you change one thing in the economy, everything else doesn't just remain the same. All right, everything else shifts around this intervention that you juice into the economy. So, if you give everyone $1,000 a month, and he says, we're gonna pay for this by supposedly, lifting the burden on the current welfare state. Basically, anyone who's already getting more than 1,000 would continue to get that amount, but the people who are already getting less than 1,000 would get $1,000. So there's some, he this is how he explains he would pay for it. But what is that going to do if you give everyone $1,000? Well, the thing that he talks about, and you can listen to the Joe Rogan podcast, he talks a lot about people starting jobs, people starting businesses. I'm sorry, but there may be a subset of the population who wants to start a business, and if they had $1,000 extra, that would help them to start a business. But the average person, that is not the case. That is especially not the case for non-whites, I think. And I talk about race a lot, but to be honest, this really does have a lot to do with intelligence. So there are dumb people who aren't going to start a business, because starting a business it does take work, it takes intelligence, and so on. You have to have a certain amount of that. And so race is kind of a proxy for intelligence oftentimes. But let's be honest, the less intelligent people, which are largely the minority groups in this country, giving them money is not going to help them start a business. Okay, these people don't have ambitions to start a business. So what is it going to do? Well, they're going to go out and spend it. And moreover, let's say that they're working at a job where they get $2,000 a month, right? And now they have an extra $1,000 a month. Well, a lot of people, frankly, are lazy, This is just a fact. If you give people free money, it's not necessarily true that they're going to keep working at the same level. They might be happy with their standard of living and decide, okay, now I can just go get a job where I'm only making $1,000 a month and I'm doing the same. And maybe they'll decide, hey, I don't even have to work, because now if I don't work, I'll have all this free time and I can get by on $1,000 a month. No problem. But it's worse than that, because, like I said, in one injection into the economy is going to change everything else. So let's talk about rent. A lot of people, as he mentioned, Yang mentioned, is they're not homeowners. So what is giving them $1,000 a month going to do? Well, they're still going to have to pay rent. And now their landlords, who want to make as much money as possible, they are going to know that these people have an extra $1,000 a month. Do you think that's not going to have an effect on the price of rent? Do you not think that's going to raise the price of rent? Because you can afford it now. Well, you've got an extra $1,000 a month, so you can afford another couple $100 in rent. Come on. So you're going to see this inflation across all sectors. And, you know, it is true, based on the Pareto principle, that if you give someone who is not very productive money, are they going to create more wealth? No. They're not going to create more wealth. If you give someone, and I know this sounds very libertarian and so on, and it's not that I'm against the government ever intervening, ever injecting money, okay? Yeah, I might say, oh, it's immoral because taxation is theft, blah blah blah, but I could still see reasons for supporting that. Absolutely. I mean, look at Hungary, where they're giving, you know, they're forgiving all tax burdens. Basically, you don't have to pay income tax if you have more than 4 children, and that's to counteract the low birth rates that's happening there. So that seems like a positive thing that will probably pay off in the long run. But just doing it as a universal basic income, it's not a smart idea. It's not a smart idea. So if you want people to start businesses, why not come out with a campaign to give people who start businesses $1,000? Now you might say, oh, well, everybody's going to want to start a business then, right? And yes, that more people will want to start a business, but there are certain criteria you'll have to submit to prove that you're working on a business, right? That is already a huge hurdle for a lot of the lower IQ people, and we have to account for these people when we're making these calculations, especially because we live in a multicultural society. And Andrew Yang has said, well, he's not against diversity, right? He wants to let more immigrants in. He wants to give a pathway to citizenship for people who are here. So he's not planning to do anything with the multiculturalism, which means that these policies are going to be a disaster and going to be an accelerationist. Frankly, even with the welfare system we have today, there are enough hurdles that these African Americans, Hispanics, so on, they can't even take the agency to apply for the quote free money, right? And you can do this. You can go in and Google, how do I get free money from the government? And then you'll come up with a page from the government that's like, well, technically it's not free money, but here's a list of all of the things that you have to do to qualify for welfare benefits and so on. But that's already a barrier into entry. And if you just give people $1,000 a month without them having to do anything, you're negating that barrier to entry. So, if you want to give away money, why not give away money and just increase the barriers to entry? Well, we all know why that would be the case. It's because people would say, that's racist, right? Anything where you have to have agency in order to follow through on benefits. You see this with the voting right, the voting. What do they call it? The voting rolls, basically. Voter ID, as they say, that's racist because black people aren't going to have the agency to go get voter ID. And it's true. It's true. Largely, it is going to impact black people because of the choices that black people make. And we know this. And so if you came out with something, this is, my guess why he didn't do it this way, where you say, oh, we're going to give small business owners $1,000 a month, is because, well, small business owners, that's largely white people. So this is going to be something that's benefiting white people. And yeah, so that's probably why this is happening. And he's trying to play both sides. He's trying to get the black vote by saying, here's some Gibbs. And he's trying to get the white vote by saying, I sympathize with your problem. This is such a huge problem for you guys. And I appreciate to some degree that he's talking about the problems facing white America. But his solutions aren't going to help white Americans. So, Tucker Carlson has talked a lot about the problems of the truck drivers and the declining male wages in this country. And it is kind of terrifying when you look at it. I think that people do blow it out of proportion because of this same effect, where the same tendency to look only at a certain change or a certain solution and not see how that solution affects the rest of the economy. So what could be done about these truck drivers? It's a good question. I mean, okay, let's say they all lose their jobs, right, to automation. Well, automation is going to create wealth, right? Andrew Yang admits this. He admits that it's going to save businesses that are already out there a lot of money. In the same way that Amazon has been able to save tons of money by using machines, this will be available for all businesses out there, and they'll be able to now transport things, maybe not complete delivery system, the logistics of it. At first the automated trucks are only going to be able to go on highways, right? They're not going to be able to go into cities as much. So there'll still be some trucker jobs. That's one reason that this gets blown out of proportion, is because, yes, a lot of those truckers will lose their jobs, but it's not going to happen all at once, right? It will be a more gradual process. So that is one thing. Now, my solution to helping these white truck drivers is to stop the immigration. First of all, that's the best thing that you can do for all American workers out there, is to put a moratorium on immigration, and also to deport people who should not be here. Deport illegals who have come into the country, who have overstayed their visas. Deport these people so that the pool for unskilled labor will be smaller. Now that'll go a large way to helping these families, okay? Beyond that, I think that some kind of a small business boost could be great. What if we say, if you're a small business owner up to a certain level, you just don't pay taxes? Well, you don't think that's going to stimulate people to start more businesses? And that's really what gets things going in the economy. This is where the libertarians kind of have it right. It's like, what stimulates the economy isn't people with cash in their pocket to go out and buy the newest Air Jordans or whatever. Or, we all know that a certain percentage of the Air Jordans aren't even being purchased, but that's another matter. Let's say you buy some fancy car or whatever. Well, that's not really stimulating the economy. What stimulates the economy is growth creation, manufacturing, where we are creating things. And apparently a lot of people still don't buy this. Again, it's probably an IQ thing. And Andrew Yang, although he's been around businesses and venture, he did Venture for America, led that nonprofit. That's very different than having a knowledge of how economics works. So, yeah, and he's also trying to rebrand the universal basic income as some kind of freedom dividend, because apparently it polls better. It's just political trickery. But I understand. I understand why he's doing it. You got to do what works. Now, but to kind of conclude, so we don't go too long on this video, Andrew Yang, he is just openly giving people money, openly buying votes and calling it a program. And this is another thing that people maybe who aren't as smart don't think about, is that what is going to happen down the road? Because with a lot of government programs, they start out okay. They start out working smoothly because of this transition where people who are in the free market, the private sector, they have experience with all this stuff. They're able to handle some kind of socialized system. But then over time, things fall apart. And you get a reduction in quality. And so what is going to happen if this UBI comes out? Do you think that future politicians are ever going to be able to campaign on eliminating the UBI? No, it's only one direction. Gibbs are only one direction. Once you start going down that path, you continue going down that path, especially when you have a low IQ population, a multicultural population. But I repeat myself. So that is the most terrifying thing about this, in my opinion, is that from now on, if Andrew Yang manages to get elected and pass this thing, well, that's it. Forever and ever. In the same way that immigration, we don't seem to be able to cut down on immigration. Trump was our one hope on that, and it seems like now he's actually saying, I want people to come into the country in the largest numbers ever. So you might get one president who can push back against this, but given how corrupt our system is, I'm very skeptical that anyone will ever be able to push back on this kind of socialism once it takes root. And then you're just going to get, it truly is accelerationism, because all the different groups are going to be vying for, well, how does this help me? And how does this help my group, and screw over Whitey? That's just going to be the norm. But here he is, and it's not just he's doing this across the board. He's saying, how do you improve public education? Well, the data shows that if you just pay teachers more, then but again, he's doing this in a vacuum, isolation. Okay, yeah, if we just have an infinite fund of money, then yeah, you pay teachers more, you're gonna be able to slightly increase the quality. But the fact is, if you look at the long trends, over the long term, we have been pumping more and more money into education. You can look at these graphs, and overall, our performance has gotten worse. So I don't buy it. Oh, well, here's an interesting tweet. Art ought to pay better. So, I'm an artist. I should really be on the Yang Gang train, right? Because he's going to give me money. Okay, I agree. Art should pay better. People should be more interested in art. What I disagree with is how we go about that. Going about that by just publicly funding art is going to be a disaster, especially in this so-called democratic system that we have. What you're going to get is what we already have, is an exacerbation of the government funding towards the arts, which just push degeneracy and left-wing propaganda. So it's like he's trying to appeal to this baser need, like, oh, give me that money, which is what stupid people think. Stupid people fall for this stuff. So in conclusion here, the problem with universal basic income is that people are always going to be customers. And that is true whether or not you have a free market. If you have a free market, they're going to be trying to please people like you and me, little guys who come into their store, for example, and buy stuff from them. In a free market, that's what people do. They try to please those people. In a socialist system, people still try to please the hand that feeds them. But in this case, the government is the hand that feeds them. And the relationship with the government, it's a lot less personal than the relationship with some guy who comes into your store, for example. Some guy down the street who's in your community. And basically, how do you please the government? You please the government in one way, and that's by voting for politicians. So that's what it's going to encourage. It's just going to encourage people to vote for more and more Gibbs. And the country will then tear itself apart and will fall into economic ruin, and goodbye all of the wealth that whites have created over the centuries. Now, I will say Andrew Yang has one good point in this in the Joe Rogan podcast. He talks about how we have to evolve beyond the measuring stick of GDP. And that is very encouraging to hear him talk about, because GDP is something that it's just a number, okay? It's not an actual truth of how healthy your economy is. In the same way that you can jigger the numbers and boost your unemployment numbers, boost your people who are in the workforce. Oh, well, if we just don't count these people who have given up on looking for work, suddenly the unemployment's super low. Imagine that. So GDP is another one of these measurements that is not a very good indicator. And I will play that clip. That's a good clip to end on.
And the third thing is, and I reference my wife when I talk about this. So my wife is at home with our two boys, 6 and 3, one of whom is autistic. And what I say is, like, what is her work valued at in GDP? And then people think about it and they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, 0, because GDP doesn't consider that actual economic contribution. And then I say we have to actually evolve from GDP as a measuring stick, because it actually doesn't work for us. It's almost 100 years old. We made it up during the Great Depression. Self-driving trucks are going to drive GDP way up, but it's going to be very, very bad for many people and communities. So we have to actually change the measuring sticks to something that would actually make our economy work for us, make it so that the market serves us instead of all us being inputs to the market.
So there you go. That is sort of the olive branch that I extend, because while I think that the libertarians have a lot of legitimate points when it comes to the economy, what gets left out oftentimes is the health of the nation, and what is a nation? A nation is its people, which in America used to be white people. It's no longer that, unfortunately, but it's still our country. There's still white people living here, a majority of us for now, and so what is best? But even if you take race out of it, even if you just say what is best for the health of all Americans who are living here now, I think we can objectively say that it's a pro-family policy, and a policy which helps the birth rates of the native people. So it's not that I'm against any kind of government intervention, but in his example, talking about mothers and so on, well, why not create a plan to give women who are married with husbands, why not give them money? The part of universal basic income that I completely disagree with is the universal part. It's not the basic income part, because I can understand how that can be a temporary bandage for some of these problems that are going to be coming about. And I'm not completely unsympathetic to the plight of truck drivers who are going to be losing their jobs and so on. But we need to be smart about it, and that's going to mean discrimination. Yes, I said it. We're going to have to discriminate, whether it's on the bounds of race or so on. If you want to create a future which is healthy, you have to discriminate against things which are unhealthy. And unfortunately, I'm just not sure as a society we're ready for that level of honesty in our policies. Which is why I have to say no to the Yang Gang. Thank you all for listening.